You have reached the No Name Cinema Society. Hello, everyone. It is Monday, April 23rd. It is our Indie Spotlight, continuing our 47th series of episodes. And always with our Indie Spotlight, we look back at indies from 5 years ago. Now, this is our first indie of our fourth season, hence the first movie we're going to talk about from the year 2013. Hello, everybody. My name is Jonathan Betzler. I'm one of your hosts here this evening. I'm very excited you're able to join us for episode 47.2, where we're going to talk about The Spectacular Now. As you can see, I'm here with my girl, Emma. We're here in Los Angeles again, and I'll be in Los Angeles for the foreseeable future. I might get to New York in May or June or somewhere along those lines, but right now I'm home in LA, and it's time for me to open my beer for the evening. And because I'm in LA, I'm going Angel City IPA. Become enamored with the IPAs lately. And I'll be drinking alone this evening, in spite of what happened on the last show. And we'll talk about that. But I needed that long day. So let me introduce my co-hosts for the evening. First, a popular and charming guy that no one takes seriously because he's drunk all the time. Ladies and gentlemen, Drunk Davie.
Thank you.
That wasn't me clapping, ladies and gentlemen. So that's Drunk Davie. And I've got an old friend who's going to go by a new name, ladies and gentlemen. George Pappas is here with us. He's going to use his real name going forward.
Thank you for that.
No longer George Michaels. Welcome, George.
George Roberts.
George Roberts, right? Devin Michaels, George Roberts.
There you go.
I got everybody's fake names mixed up.
Okay.
Yeah, George, it's Devin Michaels and was George Roberts, but now you're comfortable going by George Pappas. And we last saw you on our 1942 in review, which is one of our best episodes ever.
Thank you. It was a good one, fun one.
I'm real proud of it. And we'll talk more about it in the sound off, as George will join us for the sound off as well.
Yes.
George, this is your first indie that you've done with us. You've done a classic and a sound off, and now it's time for you to do an indie.
That's true.
With that in mind, we already talked about the sound off. Here's the schedule for this 47th set of episodes. Just this past Thursday, we talked about DJ, as he's known, Dwayne Johnson in Rampage. As our current movie discussion, this is our Indie Spotlight. Today being April 23rd, we're going to talk about The Spectacular Now. This upcoming Thursday, April 26th, we're going to talk about one of our 1942 movies that George and I talked a lot about on that special broadcast. We're going to talk about Mrs. Miniver. I'm going to make Davey watch that, and that'll be our classic film discussion. And our sound off is coming up, our 31st sound off, and that'll be a week from tonight, Monday, April 30th, where Davey will finally get to reveal his top 10 films of 2017. We're going to do a tweet beat answering all your questions about our finale episodes, the top 10, the Oscar preview, and our 1942 interview. And George and I are going to list our top 5 films from 1942. So we just talked about the Oscar races on the show. We're going to actually list our favorite films. That's our 47th set of episodes. Moving on to the Indie Spotlight, the trivia, which we did way back in January, an episode of Deep Blue Sea. Our trivia for tonight is, our first Indie Spotlight of the new season would feature an actor that was recently replaced as the actor we've discussed most on the show. On our last sound off, you may remember I announced that after doing The Last Jedi, Oscar Isaac broke a tie with Miles Teller as the actor we've discussed on the most shows, 5 shows. Now, with The Spectacular Now, Miles Teller ties him back, his 5th show that we've discussed. Davey, do you remember any of the other Miles Teller shows that we've talked about on the show? 4 others.
We did Fantastic Four. We did something else.
Fantastic Four.
No, I don't remember any. Oh, no, wait. We did all those also with Shailene Woodley, right?
Insurgent and Allegiant. And also another Indie Spotlight, episode 17.2, Rabbit Hole. Miles Teller had an important role in the film. Those 4 combined Spectacular Now make this his 5th film, tying him with Oscar Isaac as the actor we've discussed most on the show. It'll be interesting to see which of those gentlemen breaks the tie first, which leads us directly into the summary. You guys ready for the summary?
Sure.
Yeah.
Hold back your excitement, guys. Just calm down. I will get to the summary. Sutter Keeley is one of the most popular kids at school, dating one of the most popular girls. His popularity stems from his immense optimism and personality, which comes from his lack of ability to take anything too seriously. As graduation nears, that attitude that has served Sutter so well throughout his childhood starts to threaten the bubble he's built for himself in his provincial suburban town. As his girlfriend lets him go, his grades suffer and his casual drinking increases, which causes Sutter to finally wonder if the now isn't the only thing he should worry about. Guys, how was that summary?
That sums it up very well.
This is George's first indie, so he may not know how this goes. For the indies, I usually go first because one of us has to recommend the indie, and this is my recommendation. The first one of every year usually is. In fact, no one else has recommended an indie since episode 20.2 when Davie recommended Under the Skin, and we all remember how that went. Anyway, so as far as this movie is concerned, the summary may not sound like much, but let me assure you, this is a very special film. For those of you who know my work, you know that this is the kind of movie I would make, cinematically depicting people that we come across in our daily lives. And that's the key to the film's success, I think. Its achievement of verisimilitude and absolute naturalism without gimmicky tricks like handheld camera that many directors think automatically spells realism. The element that makes it feel so real, of course, are the performances, are outstanding across the board, including a star-making one for its lead, Miles Teller. I also saw it in the theater, and it was a top 5 film for me in my top 10 of 2013. That's what I have to say about The Spectacular Now. Davie, have you seen it before or heard of it prior to now?
No and no.
No and no. So we're introducing Davie to something new. So let's let him go first with opening thoughts. Davie, a sentence or so. What you think of Spectacular Now?
Super strong performances overcome a really blah storyline.
Interesting. All right, we'll have to dig into that. George.
I can understand looking at it that way. I didn't really find the storyline blah. I found it very true to life to the point where it isn't necessarily unique. But I do think that the performances were so strong that it made it universal as opposed to blah. Every character in it was just so three-dimensional. I could really believe that, 20 years earlier, you could picture the parents actually being a couple before.
Remember, opening thoughts is just a line or two, a sentence or two.
Once you start me, I cannot stop.
So, but I do want to start with the performances, and I will dig into the story because I agree exactly with what George says. I think the storyline is fine. I think what you're saying is blah. I find to be very real. I think it's and I even said that the summary didn't sound special, and yes, the performances made it special. But I think the storyline felt very honest, and we'll get to that. But I do want to start talking about what we all agree seem to be the best thing about the movie, and that is the performances.
Oh, yeah. Look, 3 of the people in it were barely known when the film was released. They've become about the most popular actors in their categories.
One of them has already won an Oscar.
Yeah.
Referring to Brie Larson. But she's not the one I want to talk about. I want to start with talking about Miles Teller, because I actually think, in spite of Whiplash and Bleed for This, I think this is the best performance of his career. It's such a layered portrait of a high school student that you so rarely see. Pain buried deep beneath the frivolous exterior. It's always present under his smiles and his jokes. It's such an accomplishment as far as performances go. Inspired choice after inspired choice. Sutter feels so vivid, like someone you know or talk to every day. That's how I feel about Miles Teller. Made some bold statements in there. Davie, am I off base?
Not at all. I think he definitely plays the kind of the crying clown. He's definitely, even when he's joking around, there's an underlying depression there that that's incredible. That kind of performance is it was amazing.
You're agreeing with me, but when you say things like crying clown, I feel like that almost puts it in too much of a box for me. That it sort of simplifies it so much that it makes me think it takes away from the performance.
No, because because he's the class clown, and he's he's joking, but you're right. It's just under the surface. You can tell that it's a mask. It's covering up the sadness that has been probably developing throughout his whole life with his family situation. He
does a really good job of peeling away at the layers and focusing on the individual scenes and letting the script take its course and trust that the script is going to guide the audience on that journey. So each scene feels so vivid. George, sound like you're in agreement as well.
Very much so. I would say it's a great combination of so cocky and so vulnerable at the same time.
They go hand in hand in a way. Yeah. The cocky is a cover for the vulnerability.
Very much so, but I think his high school classmates, his friends, could very easily not see the vulnerability if they didn't want to. His bravado is very well practiced, very well schooled. The more time he's spent nurturing that, the deeper the pain gets until it's inevitably got to come out. And it's just, you can't really take your eyes off him in the movie.
That level of performance and character details is rare in a high school movie, even from the 80s. And two, I think it's an Oscar-worthy performance. Like, it should have been nominated for Best Actor. Do we have in 2013? Does anybody disagree?
I can't remember who else was nominated, but I don't argue with your overall point. It was Oscar-worthy, yes. I felt that way about Whiplash, too.
I didn't have it as one of the top 5. That was a year we had Eddie Redmayne and Michael Keaton.
That's true.
In 2013 is when we had the 12 Years a Slave. So we had Chiwetel Ejiofor.
Matthew McConaughey,
yeah. I do think he could have slipped into that 5. I had him above Matthew McConaughey, quite frankly. Davey, my 2 statements, Oscar-worthy and rare for a high school movie?
Yes. It's definitely an Oscar-level performance, no question about it.
With that, let's move on to, before we run out of time, Shailene Woodley. He was not nominated for Indie Spirit Award. She was, and she does give a great performance in spite of not having the showy character. Sutter is very larger than life to some degree. Amy is not so much, but I still think it's a beautiful performance in spite of the introverted nature. That introverted nature felt very honest, and unlike other nerds that we see in high school movies, again, another unique take on a high school movie trope. Her need, her love of experiencing love is writ so largely on her face, and it's frequently heartbreaking. You have the perspective of knowing where Sutter's at. That's what I have to say about Shailene Woodley. George, you first on Shailene.
Anytime I've seen her, I've really loved her work. And this, I'm pretty sure, was the first performance of hers I ever saw.
The Descendants was 2 years before this.
Oh, I did see that. Yes, you're right. Okay, it's the second. The first time she made a huge impression on me. I was so moved by her. I mean, she's so, you can see how she'd be the type of girl in school that would be picked on, but the strength underneath that is so, you want everything to work out for her. You understand why she connects to him. You understand why it might be a good thing. But all through the movie, you don't want to see him hurt her. He doesn't mean to, but it's very possible that he's going to.
I agree, but I want to put a pin in that because I do want to talk about the ending later on. So, Davey, what do you have to say about Shailene?
It's an incredibly strong performance. In particular, I think this is something you touched on. There's no quirk, no idiosyncrasy, no gimmick. She's really got to just focus on the emotion and the vulnerability, and she pulls it off quite well.
As George mentioned, across the board, the performances are really strong, creating like a very natural world. Like, I love the world that was created. We'll talk about that more with direction. But instead of singling out all the performances, the one that I do want to mention, and you guys will get a chance to mention your own, is I do want to single out Kyle Chandler, who creates such an indelible, memorable, and important character with 6 minutes of screen time? I didn't count.
Not on screen long at all.
Such specificity of choices that you know this character immediately, and you also know from a story functionality point of view how that made Sutter who he was. And George, you even referred to, you can see the parents as a couple earlier in life.
Oh, yeah. You definitely have a sense of their history. When he actually defends her to Sutter, you had a sense of what a disappointment he must have been to her. What really strikes me, though, about Kyle Chandler in this is how anytime I'd seen him prior to this, he's such a hero. In this film, he really manages to capture the loser that was a lovable lunk at one point. The negativity just overtook him and makes him a very difficult person to be around. The way he just dismisses his son, who's come all the way to see him, it's like, it's no big deal. Oh, just wait for me. I'm going to go out for my booty call here. You all just wait for me. Like, it's just no big deal to him at all. It's devastating.
At the same time, you can see Sutter doing that as well.
I think it's a wake-up call for him.
Oh, for sure, without a doubt.
But yes, you see that Sutter is his parents' child.
And that's what's great about both performances and elements of the screenplay. I don't want to spend too much time on Kyle Chandler, but you made me think of this. Like, if you look at, because he's known for Friday Night Lights, although I saw him even before then on a show called Early Edition. That was a terrible show, but
I remember that show.
Definitely stood out on that show. If you look at his oeuvre over the last now 5 years, between this and Carol and Super 8 and Manchester by the Sea, I mean, like, he's putting together quite a resume of eclectically different performances, and he's highly underrated, never Oscar nominated, probably should have been nominated for Carol. I don't know why he's not more of a leading man. He's a good-looking guy, got a lot of range.
Who knows what determines how those things happen, but he did spend a lot of time on a television show.
Oh, absolutely, and he won an Emmy as a result.
Yeah.
But Davey, do you have anything on Kyle Chandler, or do you want to single out another performance that I didn't mention?
Well, I think I'll move to a different one just because I think you covered Kyle Chandler. It was great. I thought Bob Odenkirk was great, and the actress who plays his mother,
Jason Lee,
great as well.
One thing I want to say about Jennifer Jason Lee is what an understated performance this is. It's so truthful and strong. She brings a whole history into this, and obviously it was directed by someone who knows how to work with actors and brings the best out of them.
That's a great segue. That's a great segue, because you would think, we talk about it on the show all the time, if you have this many great performances, you usually the director is doing something right. But it's, interestingly enough, nothing else in the career of director James
No,
Cameron
that's
comes
true.
close to achieving this level of naturalism. On the contrary, performances like in films like Smashed and The Circle are not fully realized at all. They're a weak point.
I have not seen them.
So I think it's really interesting that the performances are so strong here. I mean, he must have done something right. To your point, George, he definitely created an environment that was open to improv and freedom. Either that, or actors like Kyle Chandler and Miles Teller demanded it. It's hard to say, but I mean, nothing else in his career suggests this level of performance work.
I haven't seen the other films you've mentioned. I can say that I knew people who thought Mary Elizabeth Winstead was terrific and Smashed. I didn't see the movie.
He was pushing, and you know what I mean by that term.
Yeah. Well, usually when I see her, I think she's outstanding.
She's good here too.
I hardly recognize her, actually.
Aaron Paul is the real problem for me in Smash. Has her moments. Davey, I don't suppose you've seen Smash.
I haven't. I saw The Circle.
And it was bad, right?
Yeah, it was horrible. It was bad.
Tidbit of what will not make Davey's top 10 on the sound. Other things about the direction that I thought were interesting. He got out of the way of the story and the actors, which is good. But also I think the choice, we never talk about makeup, but the incredible lack of makeup in this movie added to the naturalism. A very refreshing choice. The skin of the kids is very real. It helped, pun intended, to flesh out the movie a little bit. Guys, do you have anything on makeup? Am I off base here?
I noticed it wasn't so much makeup, but Brie Larson and Mary Elizabeth Winstead look completely different after this film. It's like they're heavier in this movie. And I wondered if they fell into the Hollywood thing of have to look my thinnest after seeing themselves on camera in this. I don't know.
I think it's more towards the other end of things, is if anything, they would have put something on for this movie to look more real and less beautiful. There was a concerted effort to not have models walking around this small provincial suburb.
Then maybe that's it. Maybe that's what I saw. I just noticed they looked different, and I was like, wow.
Davey, anything on makeup?
No.
The other interesting choice directorially that I wanted to bring up is cinematography. Is for a movie like this, an indie movie like this, they made a very unusual choice to shoot on film, and especially a movie that was going for this level of verisimilitude. Normally film, and not just film, but anamorphic lenses. Normally those two things are saved for big budget spectacles. I thought it was really interesting to apply that to a film that's going for the utmost of naturalism. It's like the opposite direction of all those gimmicks that are normally used to achieve realism. So guys, the look of the film, I don't know if you noticed the anamorphic nature of it, but how do you guys feel about how the film looked?
I could never put it in the terms you just put it in. I mean, I would never.
I don't necessarily expect you to notice the anamorphic nature and the reasons behind it, but did you think it looked okay?
Yeah, I did. It seemed to be shot wide in many ways and yet still have a sense of intimacy. That's what I took from having watched
it. The framing was the next thing I was going to talk about. He relied on wide shots a lot, which is rarely done. A lot of directors don't feel comfortable. I think about the scene where they're about to go to the prom and sitting on the car. After the prom, they're in a hallway, sort of talking about the future, and he holds wide. And that final scene with Bob Odenkirk is wide for a great deal of that as well. And it's kind of rare to trust your wide shots. A lot of directors will want to punch in, and when I say punch in, I mean go for a close-up and get the tight reactions of the actor's face. But here he stays wide and you feel the space a little more. Yeah, I think it showed a lot of restraint in a positive way.
Definitely the way the movie was shot, it felt like a bigger budget film. He didn't seem to be worried about showing lack of a fancy set. He would show you the store, the scene with Bob Odenkirk, like you mentioned. I mean, it's it's just a room and a desk and he was fine with us seeing the whole thing. And I think it added to a little realism, but I think it also, a lot of small budget films, there's a lot of close in shots, and they don't want you to see that there isn't a whole lot of set there. It didn't seem to be a concern to him, and I think it added to the realism, and it worked really well.
Well, shooting on location helps, and enough exteriors to let the town be a character as well. We're out of time a little bit because I want to get to the T word, but before we do, Davie hampered on the story a little bit, and George and I disagree with him to some degree. The story, I have some issues with the screenplay, which I'll get to, I hope, but I want to let Davie wax poetic a little bit on the story because I feel like it didn't have the bells of whistles. It was sort of ordinary life kind of story, but I still found it compelling. The performances helped, but I like that kind of natural story. It felt very real, the story. Do you disagree with that?
No, it's real. It's so real. It's entirely predictable. I knew that once you see him drink a couple times a day, he's an alcoholic. He's going to get her to drink. There's going to be an accident. He says this, oh, my dad's a pilot. Clearly that was nonsense. And then I knew ultimately that his mother was covering for him. One scene, you can tell that's how that's going to go. She's just protecting him, doesn't want him to know about his father. Yeah, I know what's happening. I know what's going to happen. And whatever. It's not what the movie's about. I understand that. But to me, it's a little frustrating when you can just read the whole ending so early.
I watched it again last night for the show tonight, and it was my second viewing. So I don't know if I don't know if I remember back 5 years ago to know if I remember feeling that. I obviously loved the movie, so it didn't bother me. I can see your points, and I probably was able to predict a few things, but I was so in love with the movie, I guess it didn't bother me. I don't know. It was so well executed that it didn't bother me. George,
it was perfectly executed.
I agree with you, what you said about how well executed it was, compensating for what Davie is describing. I can say, though, that there were moments where I thought I could see what was coming, particularly the car. The minute he told her to get out of the car, you're like, oh my God. Sometimes you can see a train wreck. You do see the accident about to happen, and there's just nothing you can do to stop it. We all have a life experience that these teenagers didn't have. These things can happen, and we know about them in a way that they might not. And also, what I think would have killed the movie is if the accident had killed her. That would have been the problem. Because the accident happens, but life goes on, it isn't damaging, predictable moment.
And she's so forgiving. It breaks my heart when in the next scene they're together. It's like nothing happened. I love it and I hate it.
Yeah, no, we have an ambiguous reaction to it. You know what you would like to see a strong person do, and yet you want things to work. These are people you want things to work out for.
I do feel like the device of the college essay was a crutch and a weak one. All the information that was given from that, I could have gotten from watching how the actors behaved. It was trite and overused. And also, I agree with you. I wanted them to get together. I also think the movie could have just ended after that kitchen scene, him and Jennifer Jason Leigh. It does cut to black and then cuts back onto the essay. I think if it just ended there, that would have been really interesting and still a successful movie and powerful.
I actually agree with you about the essay. That's the sort of gimmick of a more shallow film.
Both Dope and Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, don't they use the same exact device?
Yes.
I do not remember.
Dope does.
Me and Earl and the Dying Girl did.
Yeah, so Davie's confirming that Dope did. Thanks, guys, for separately confirming what I say. You disagree with ending at the kitchen scene. You wanted them to get together.
No, it's not. I don't even know how together they get. I think there's a real
There's ambiguity, but the fact that he's there, and we know her, she's going to give him a chance. Come on.
See, I always thought that the very end, he has stiffed her one too many times by now. She's not going to be quite as open.
She's going to be reticent, but she's going to, I think she's the moment she's always dreamed of.
We don't know. I think it's very ambiguous.
I think she was getting ready to tell him about the new guy that she just met.
Very possibly.
Yeah.
I didn't think I was the optimist in the group, but apparently.
I don't know what gives you that outlook, but good for you, man.
Yeah, thanks. I've got nothing to base that on.
That's my impression. I don't know if it's a new guy, but she's basically.
What if it had just ended at the kitchen, cut to black?
A major portion of the movie would have felt incomplete.
Do you think so? It's only 3 minutes longer than that, if that.
That's all it takes.
I don't know. That 3 minutes is sort of like using the crutch, and then all of a sudden he shows up at the campus. After that scene, he's starting his journey, and I feel like that's all you need to know. starting his journey back. Instead of having trait lines like, this essay may be not in time, I've still got plenty of time, or whatever the line was. It was a little dopey and hokey. So which brings us to Davey's favorite segment of all shows, the T word, themes. Davey hates talking about themes of movies for some reason, but we do it all the time because we dig deeper, guys. We dig deeper into these movies. A lot of people, like, when I talk to about this movie, they think it's a film about alcoholism, but I don't think that it really is. I think that's an element, but I really think it's about self-esteem and self-worth. And in that sense, Amy is an interesting choice for him. Someone who outwardly doesn't feel like she's worthy of love, specifically his love in some cases. And almost that's what he sees in her, that element of himself that he buries so deep. Guys, what do you think about this theme I'm pitching about self-esteem and self-worth?
I think you're on the money. I think there's an element of her not valuing herself enough and thinking that she can't do better than she is. I also think that it's more than that. I think she's also got kind of a savior complex as well, and she thinks she can save him and help him.
Interesting. I didn't pick up on that so much. I'm not disagreeing. I didn't see it. George, what do you think?
The most prevailing thing that I got from it was that this was the story about the child of an alcoholic, that even though he wasn't around to see that, the father's alcoholism, which creates, even in a parent who's in the home who was an alcoholic, there's an absentee element to that because the person is never really there. The mother might have thought he was being spared that, but the absence was still so strong and the genetics just led him down a certain path. I think that's a very strong part of the film, but it's one that he's very bright and he's smart enough to, when he faces it, and he doesn't really face it until he sees his father, I believe. It's a smack in the face. His ability to grow past it, to work on it.
Potentially grow past it.
Yes, you don't doubt that he has it in him to maybe do what he has to do.
I wrote parenting and nature versus nurture down in the sense that, yes, like the genetics that you talked about, yes, there's genetics, but also the absentee element, the lack of upbringing that leads him down a certain path and makes him feel less than. But at the same time, there's how that interacts with our ability to not recreate ourselves, but determine, that's maybe why it was for me about self-worth, his ability to overcome that and determine who he is, determine who he really is and who he wants to be. It's about decisions, and you can overcome that nature versus nurture potentially. I'm sort of tying our themes together.
Yeah.
I love cutting to Davey during the T-word segments and looking really, really bored. Davey, this is what watching movies are about, digging underneath them and getting to the heart of them.
You bet.
The other one I wrote down was, it did have a little bit of like interesting relationship dynamics, but that was a sort of a minor exploration for me. So guys, I'm going to close it down. Anybody have any closing thoughts?
No thoughts on their sex scene?
Thoughts on their sex scene that you'd like to talk about? I thought it was lovely.
No, it is, but the things that could happen in a more cliched movie don't happen at all. It really feels like it's not overly glamorous. It's very realistic, them working together to make it work. It's very rare that you see that depicted. And
in this movie are like pitch perfect like that. And again, you got to give James Ponsoldt some credit. Not been able to recreate that, but I mean, like, the tone is so consistent. Maybe for closing thoughts, we'll do a favorite scene. Do you guys have a favorite scene or moment?
I don't think I do. I think it's all of a piece.
I mean, there's a bunch, like the scene where they're walking together in the forest for me is particularly special. They take a walk in a wooded area away from a party.
I thought that the accident scene was actually pretty effective because
he saw it coming, but he liked it anyway.
I did, because at least there was a fake out. She gets out of the car and you think, well, they didn't wreck. I mean, like, wow, there was no accident, then bam. So I was like,
It surprised me again. I'd forgotten that happened.
I thought it was well done.
So guys, our next indie, we're going to continue with our 2013 indies, and the trivia for the next indie is, before she created two popular shows that put Amazon on the TV map, this writer-director created this comedy, our next indie for discussion in a month or so. And next up is going to be our classic movie discussion just on Thursday, April 26th, and we're going to dig deeper, even deeper, into the biggest film of 1942. Obviously, we talked about it a lot. George and I did on our 1942 in Review show. But this time, Davey will join in, and we're going to have a special guest. And we're going to talk about Mrs. Miniver, the Best Picture-winning film from 1942. That's coming up on Thursday. All right, guys, say goodbye to our audience.
Bye, all.
Bye, folks.
In the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, this meeting of the No Name Cinema Society is adjourned.